Behind me is the brand new 2021 Ram 1500 TRX. It is a 702 horsepower half-ton truck. It costs nearly $92,000. And in this video, we are going over the crazy gizmos and gadgets that make it so cool. The TRX is built to be a road-legal Baja truck, something you can take crazy jumps and whoops with at crazy fast speeds. Now, in order to accomplish this, they had to make it quite a bit wider than the standard Ram 1500, and you can definitely see that width here in the fender. They've actually also incorporated these functional vents that flow through to the back of the fender. But the TRX is so wide, they had to give it marker lights like a semi-truck. That's right, when you cruise down the road at night and you see those 18-wheelers with those lights up on the roof, well, those are there so you know how wide the vehicle is, and the Ram TRX has them here as well, but they're built into the hood. Now, there are 3 here in the hood scoop. They illuminate orange. There's an additional 2, one located here on each front fender, and there's an additional 5 in the back of the TRX as well, 1 on each rear fender. These illuminate red. And then the hidden ones are actually here below the tailgate. You've got 3 more, just so you know when you're driving behind a TRX how wide this truck really is. Probably the most in-your-face aspect of the front end of the TRX is the hood scoop. And this is a proper functional hood scoop that feeds air directly into the 6.2 liter supercharged V8. Now you can see at speed, air is going to be forced into this big scoop, and then it then continues its path down the length of the hood through these holes and then down here into the air filter. Now, funny enough, the TRX actually sucks in air through multiple places, and it receives about 50% of its total volume of air through that hood scoop. Now, when you open the hood to the TRX, you are greeted by this large cover, and you'd expect this to be the cover for the air filter, but it is in fact a cover for another cover. Let me lift it up and show you. Simply clips into place. There you have it. You got another cover held on by bolts. What it really covers is this right here, which is a built-in Easter egg on every TRX. What we see here is an image of a T-Rex eating a raptor. And this is a hilarious Easter egg. This is, of course, in reference to this vehicle's primary competitor, the Ford F-150 Raptor. And basically they're saying TRX eats raptor. That's pretty clever, although I don't know why this cover is here. Why they need so many covers to cover the air filter is a mystery to me, but it simply snaps into place. The key of the TRX looks like pretty much every other Ram key until you turn it over, and then you see Ram TRX spelled out across the back. Now, when you look at the front here, pretty standard in its operation. Unlock, lock. You've got a button here for the remote start. You can push this button twice and lower the tailgate, and then of course your panic alarm. But the best part is you don't need to use the key to get into the vehicle. You can put it in your pocket and then just grab the door handle. When you open the door to the TRX, you are greeted by a bunch of differences that make the TRX special compared to the standard Ram, starting with the seats. Now the seats are, in this case, full leather, but even better than that, they incorporate the TRX logo here on the back of the seats, and then the bolstering is much stronger on the TRX compared to the standard Ram truck, because Ram is guessing that you're going to take this truck out and do some high performance driving that you might not in something like a Tradesman or a Bighorn Ram 1500. And then of course we get to the heart of the beast, the 702 horsepower, 6.2 liter supercharged Hemi V8. Now Ram won't explicitly tell you this, but this is basically the same engine you'd find in the Challenger and Charger Hellcat. In fact, on top of the supercharger there, you get the little Hell Kitty logo. Now, some interesting things about the engine itself. 2.4 liter supercharger. The supercharger on top of the V8 is larger than the entire engine of a lot of economy cars. And then we get to the color. You'll notice the valve covers there are orange. That is a classic Mopar trait that dates way back, decades and decades and decades, that distinguish this engine from its competition and lets you know there's something very special underneath those covers. And in fact, there is over 700 horsepower worth of pickup truck. This particular TRX is equipped with a $495 graphics package, or if you're anyone else in the world, stickers! So it's got stickers on the side of the vehicle that spell out TRX. it is one of the few things I'm a little bit disappointed with, because this is the Halo truck. I'd love to see like a T-Rex holding a flamethrower, you know, like driving a monster truck, you know, over like a group of Mustangs or something crazy like that. But, you know, the TRX is very subtle, very toned down. The Mustang's the car, not the horse, people. The car. This is monster truck rally stuff. We got to talk about wheels and tires, because it's pretty insane on the TRX. Goodyear Wrangler Territory AT tires. This is a brand new tire, but more importantly, it's 35 inches in diameter. The largest tire available on any new vehicle. Well, it's actually tied with its direct competitor, the Raptor. That also has a 35-inch tire. Now the wheels here are a little bit interesting as well. A couple different wheel designs. This one is the optional beadlock capable wheel. And what does that mean? Well, do you see these line of bolts that extend around the entire circumference of the wheel? This is a ring that pops off the wheel. You can then unseat the bead and use the ring to hold the bead of the tire up against the wheel so it will never come off. This is great if you're in a rock crawling situation. You can completely deflate the tire and it's not going to pop off the wheel. It's also illegal, believe it or not, to run with a design like this on the road, because there's a big rollover risk in that if you take a corner too fast, you're not going to pop the tire off the wheel. It's just going to roll. So that's why it's beadlock capable. It comes as an optional kit that you have to install yourself afterwards so that their lawyers don't get all freaked out. Now the front end of the TRX is actually all new and unique to this truck, and a great example of that is the Ram logo. It looks like a fairly standard Ram logo if you're standing 5 or 10 feet back, but when you get close you notice something interesting. The letters are actually pass-through, and this is so that we have no blockage of air into the radiator. Every letter, be it the R, the A, or the M, has slits in it so that the radiator and the cooling system has the most possible airflow. And then we come to the steering wheel, which is super racy, especially for a pickup truck. First of all, you've got really thick bolstering up here by the thumbs. You've got suede along the top and suede along the flat bottom, just like a high-performance car. You even have a carbon fiber insert. How crazy is that? But the coolest part of the steering wheel are the paddle shifters. Of course, you've got one to downshift, one to upshift here on the right, but even more bizarre than that, there's a cutout in the paddle shifters to accommodate these buttons. Now, Ram trucks have these buttons behind the steering wheel to adjust things like the radio. So I can tune the radio on the left, I can adjust the volume on the right. But in order to do that, they had to incorporate a little cutout so you can actually reach them. I think Ram assumes that you're probably going to be adjusting the radio more than you're going to be downshifting your 6.2 liter Hemi. The next big differentiator between the TRX and every other Ram 1500 is right here, the console shift. Now this may look pretty standard if you haven't seen the interior of the new Ram trucks, but this is very unusual because this is a traditional shifter with park, reverse, neutral drive, and sport modes. You pull it back to select a gear, whereas most Ram trucks have their shifter up here in this little panel, and it's actuated by this little hockey puck rotary knob. Every Ram 1500 TRX comes equipped with this ginormous tablet-like screen. It's just huge. It's actually called the 12-inch screen, but it looks bigger than that to me, in my opinion. It's all touch incorporated, so everything from climate controls to media are all done through the screen. You do have some hard buttons here along the side, but it's standard in the TRX. So if you want a smaller screen with more buttons, you just can't have it in this truck. Now below the screen, we see a number of switches that say aux on them. This stands for auxiliary. And with this panel, you can actually incorporate a number of aftermarket accessories without cutting holes in your dash for switches. So for example, if I wanted a number of LED lights, I can simply flick them on here using the auxiliary switches. I don't have to mangle up my dash with some hokey aftermarket switch. It's all here in the middle. Now next to the auxiliary switches, you'll notice this, a trailer brake controller. This truck is equipped with the towing package, which means I have a trailer brake controller, and it will tow up to 8,100 pounds, which sounds like a ton if you're not from the pickup truck world, but as half-ton trucks go, that's pretty minimal. This is a fairly important component to the Ram TRX because you're going to be accessing it a lot. This is, of course, the fuel filler. Now, a couple interesting things. The fuel cap itself is actually a perfect circle, which is a little bit unusual. Okay, it's a weird thing I noticed there, but it is a little bit unusual. Push in on it, pull it out, and you'll notice there's no gas cap. It is a pretty standard capless fuel system. Now, in terms of fuel economy, not great. The EPA rates this at 14 mpg highway 12 mpg combined, but 10 mpg city, miles per gallon city. Now, Andre's been driving this truck for a couple of days. We did take it and did a little bit of drag racing this morning. He's been averaging, drumroll please, 8.5. Whew, that is up, but that is just astonishing is the only word for it. Now the start button for the TRX is up here in the center of the dashboard, and it's bright red. That's pretty cool. Foot on the brake, push the start button. And hear that 6.2 liter fire into life. The TRX is of course a pickup truck, which means it has to have a bed. Now it has a pretty standard tailgate with a little button pop. Soft closing, so I simply push the button and it glides down by itself. Now the bed itself is, pretty standard for the half-ton world with the crew cab configuration. It's about 5.5, 6 feet long, but you'll notice a couple of interesting things. Now I'm a, fairly tall, albeit super string beanie guy, but the point is here is, even at 6'1", there's no way I'm going to be reaching over the side to grab tools or anything pretty much in the bed. That's how tall it is. And you also notice this one appears to be perpetually carrying a tire. Now this is an optional Mopar accessory. I believe the mount itself is like $1,000, but it allows you to mount a second spare tire onto the TRX. The idea with this is basically straight out of the race world. You'll see race trucks with these all the time. You're cruising down, a Mexican desert at 80 miles an hour. You get a flat tire. Okay, fix it, and then you do it again, you get another flat tire, well, you're screwed. And that's where this comes in. You have 2 spares. Unfortunately, it is bolted down to the bed, and it means that you really don't have any bed left. So I don't know if I would go for this option, but if you're super into that race truck look, you gotta get the optional bed-mounted spare tire. Luckily, if you don't want that, there's still a standard spare mounted underneath. The TRX also has special gauges compared to the standard Ram. First of all, it of course says TRX up here on the top, but I like what they've done with this. It's semi-digital, semi-analog. So if I start it up here, you can kind of see this cool TRX animation. And within the screen, I control a lot of the vehicle's functions. I can see the fuel economy, and I can also see the trip and trailer tow and all my important information like the radio. But next to the screen, I've got a standard tachometer and a standard speedometer with 120 mile per hour top speed. This truck is actually limited to 118 miles per hour because of the tires. Now there are a ton of extra gauges here in the center that the TRX has over the standard Ram 1500, but if you want more, you can open up something called performance pages. Now performance pages allows me to run performance testing on my own using the truck's computer. So I can do 0 to 60, 0 to 100 mile per hour tests if I want, braking distances, quarter miles, all of that will be timed here in the center of the truck. But look at the crazy number of gauges located below the timers here. Coolant temp, oil pressure, trans temp, inlet coolant temp for the supercharger if you want. I also have G-force gauges. I also have dyno and engine information, so I know how much of the crazy horsepower I'm using, and I can graph it out, and it's pretty wild the amount of telemetry you can get into. I also have a vehicle dynamics page here, so I know when my four-wheel drive is engaged, when my wheels are articulated, and when the axles are locked. And speaking of the four-wheel drive system on the TRX, I have a number of options, but it's not like your typical pickup truck. Now, driving around every day, you'll run the TRX in four-wheel drive auto, and the transfer case will split the torque front and rear as it sees fit. Up to about 75% of torque can go to the rear end. Then I have a button for four-wheel drive high. That's going to lock it into more of a 50-50 torque split. I have a button here for four-wheel drive low. That engages the low-range transfer case. And this right here is the rear axle lock. The rear axle lock also works in 4 high, so if you want to do massive donuts or drifts, you can with the rear differential lock. You don't have to go into 4 low. There's also a little neutral button there and a launch control. So using launch control, I can get the best impossible 0 to 60 times according to RAM. But another cool function of the TRX is up here, the mode selector. Now the drive modes are one of the coolest parts of the TRX, and using this toggle I can set up the vehicle for pretty much any kind of terrain, from snow to custom modes, mud and sand, rock crawl, Baja modes, sport modes, tow modes are all incorporated in the vehicle. This not only changes steering and throttle response, but it also changes the suspension tuning. Let me show you. The Ram TRX uses a pretty trick suspension system. They call it the Blackhawk E2, but it's made by Bilstein here, and there's a lot going on in the suspension. Now, first of all, this tube goes to the remote reservoir, so that allows you to run over long periods of time over rough terrain without the shock overheating. But this is the really interesting part, this wire that actually enters the shock absorber, and this can change on the fly how the shock performs. So it can get stiffer, it can get softer depending on the mode you're in, depending on the type of terrain you're driving over. It's got all sorts of sensors. It can tell the vehicle body roll. It's insanely complex, but that is one of the magic of the TRX. Now, the Raptor has a live valve technology incorporated into it as well. That one is made by Fox. So both Ram and Ford are going crazy in terms of shock tech. This TRX is equipped with the carbon fiber package. Now that gives you carbon fiber across the dash, on the steering wheel, and a couple other places. And carbon fiber is a very cool thing to have in a vehicle. It's typically there to save weight, although this truck is so incredibly heavy. It's more here for just a style factor. It's also a $1,300 option, so not sure I'd go for that. Every TRX comes equipped with this VIN plate that is attached to the center console. It shows you some pretty cool stuff like the engine, the horsepower, the supercharger displacement, for some reason the supercharger boost. But the coolest part is the VIN number. This one is number 171. The funny thing about this is VIN stands for Vehicle Identification Number. So basically it's the Vehicle Identification Number. But hey, it's such a common thing that even I say all the time. It's spelled like that. There's another Easter egg at the base of the center console. We can see the Ram truck here, a giant TRX chasing, well, I assume that's a Raptor, that little tiny dinosaur. It's kind of hard to see, but it's once again another jab at Ford. But big center console. Up here on the lid, we've got a protractor. We've got trigonometric ratios in case you're in middle school and need to study last minute for that test. But my favorite feature is actually these little coin holders, and they're labeled with 10 cents, 1 cent, 5 cent, 25, another 25, and $half coin places. Now this particular Ram TRX is a $1,000 technology option that includes things like this, which is a digital rearview mirror. Now it obviously looks like a standard rearview mirror unless I pull this lever, in which case, bam, I've got a camera here, and I've got a number of settings as well that I can mess with, from brightness to even like position. So it's kind of cool that it's there. You can see I can move the camera up and down. I have a hard time using these because it hurts my brain to go from real world to digital really quickly. But it's there if you want it. It also has a heads-up display, the first ever Ram, Jeep, or Chrysler or any FCA product to come equipped with a heads-up display. Now the TRX has a massive rear seat, but so does the standard Ram 1500, and that's probably not a surprise because the actual cab itself is pretty much the same as any other Ram. It's just the stuff that's in the cab that's a little bit special. So tons of legroom, but take a look at this. Look at all the luxury features back here. USB-C ports. I also have heated seats and ventilated rear seats. The rear seat itself is really clever. Take a look at one of the coolest features I've seen in the back seat of any truck. There's a little handle located beneath the cushion, and I can pull the handle. And take a look at that, I have some extra recline here on the rear seats. But apart from that, the seats fold up in a couple different sections, and now I have a totally flat floor, which is great for dogs or for large items. But if I want a little bit of additional hidden storage, I can fold out this little cubby down here. See how it works, just like that. And now I can store cables and the like into this little area, but it's configurable as well, so I can fold it completely out of the way if I needed to. There are a bunch of colors available on the Ram 1500 TRX. This is a pretty good one. This is billet silver metallic. It's a silver color, but my favorite part of it, it's actually contrasted against this black two-tone. So they have a black accenting across the lower portion of the door here. Two tones I think are brilliant. I love that they're making a comeback, and it looks great with the silver and the black. Now, speaking of the lower portion of the door, we do have this giant rail that extends the length of the vehicle. This is called a rock rail, and when you're out in some super serious rocks, the idea is that if you've got a really tall pointy one, you're going to bash it into this rail and not into the rocker panel or the door, save you a ton of money and pain and effort. Now, the rock rail is a little bit interesting in the TRX here. It is optional, and it does hold half the weight of the vehicle. So ideally you'd want it to hold the entire weight of the vehicle if you're resting the whole thing on one giant rock, but Ram says it will hold half the weight. It also kind of works as a step, slightly. You can see my granny shoes here. They do hold a little bit, but it's primarily there for rocker protection. The TRX starts at about $70,000, and when you see behind me, almost 92 grand. Is it worth it? Well, if you want the craziest, the loudest, the quickest truck in the land, then yeah, it's worth it. I mean, the average guy doesn't need a TRX, but the average guy wants a TRX. And if you're very successful and you gotta have the most insane Ram out there, there's only one truck to fit the bill. I love that we exist in a time where we can have a 700 horsepower supercharged V8 half-ton. I don't think this time will ever exist again in history, just the way the world is shifting, and with the rise of electrification, which is really exciting, that might be a dinosaur, but at least it's the craziest dinosaur available. Well, as always, this is Tommy with TFL Off-Road. Be sure to stay tuned because we've got a ton of driving impressions videos coming up. We'll take this thing towing, we're going to take it off-road. That's all coming up soon, but I just had to show you these crazy gadgets and gizmos. Pretty cool, right?